All right, let's go ahead and get started. As I said before, welcome everyone to the SoCoPark Master Plan Open House. We are really excited to be here today. My name is Juliet Vong, and I'm with HBB Landscape Architects. I am a consultant working for the city and will be one of the facilitators today. We're going to do introductions in just a minute here, and then you can see on our agenda, we've got kind of a packed agenda, but most of it will go pretty quickly. So we'll try and leave plenty of opportunity for some Q&A at the end. We do have a few spots along the way where we're going to get you engaged. We have a couple of live poll questions. So if you have a phone or a tablet handy, you'll also be able to use your laptop to be able to log in to a site, and we'll kind of walk you through that process as we go through. So for introductions, once again, my name's Juliet. I am one of the principals at HBB Landscape Architecture and leading the park master planning process. We are a consultant working for the city. We have a long history in doing park and recreation design work. It's actually one of my favorite things. It's why I became a landscape architect. And we really love that community input process. So excited to have some folks join us and hoping to hear a lot of your comments today. With me, let's see, I'm going to let Ethan maybe introduce yourself next.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Ethan Newton. I'm the Parks Director for the City of Covington. I just want to share a little bit about the history of this project. Over the last 5 years, the city has acquired 3 parcels, and we're now excited to be in the design phase, and that's what HBB Landscape Architects are helping us with. This is also being made possible with a Department of Commerce grant that the city was successful in obtaining from the state in the amount of $1.3 million. So that's a great way to get an investment into the city and into the park system here. So thank you.
And Merritt.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Merritt. We are with HBB Landscape Architecture, and I'm super excited to be part of this master planning and phase 1 improvements for the SoCoPark in Covington. Happy to be here today.
And then not shown on our screen, but also with us today is Michelle. Michelle, you want to say hi?
Yes, I'm Michelle. I'm also with HBB Landscape Architecture. I'm just going to mostly be here as kind of a support, so I probably will turn my camera off so I'm not too distracting from the presenters.
Michelle's going to help us with some of those live polls that we talked about, and then also help facilitate some of those QA and chat discussions. So let's go to the next slide. So a little bit about our format. Most of you are likely familiar with our Zoom format by now. We've been in COVID for quite a few years now, so this is pretty familiar to just about everybody, but a couple of reminders, the same with any in-person meetings or Zoom meetings. We're here to try and have fun, to give you a chance to participate. We want to make sure everybody feels safe being able to do so and are able to participate in the way that you're most comfortable doing so. So you are all muted with your video off. When we get to the Q&A discussion portion, we will have an opportunity to unmute you. And so Ethan's going to help us with that. If you have something you'd like to say, or like to offer some comments or discussion topics, we'll be able to unmute you. You'll get a little button that says, would you like to unmute yourself? And you can click that little unmute button. Once that occurs, you can speak live. If I call out you and I say, hey, so-and-so looks like you have some interesting feedback, would you like to speak? We'll unmute you. You're welcome to just come online and say, no, thank you, not at this time. And we'll move on as well. So you certainly don't have to speak live if you're not comfortable doing so. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Sometimes it's at the top, depending on your device. We're going to ask you to use that QA button to kind of insert any questions that you might have. There is a chat button as well. So if you've just got discussion points, so you want to offer some comment or feedback or just give an opinion, you're welcome to use that chat button. We're going to use the QA button during the Q&A sessions. It's a little easier for us to be able to track your questions because we will hold questions until those Q&A discussion points in the presentation, so that we don't lose track of them. We will keep an eye on that chat as well, so you can use either if you'd like. Please be patient. We have occasionally experienced some technical glitches along the way. We do our best to try and avoid them, but We're all familiar with how that can happen. And all ideas matter at this point. We really want to allow space for others. So if you're kind of the kind of person who really has a lot to say and offer a lot of comments, that's great. We want to hear from you. We'll ask you sometimes to step back and let others a chance to participate as well. We have a fairly small group, so it should go pretty smoothly. But just a reminder, we are really trying to create a space that everyone can provide some of their comments and feedback into. And then finally, there is a closed captioning button. It's along the same toolbar. It should be as your Q&A and your chat buttons as well. So you can click on that closed captioning if you'd like to see the live transcript scroll across. Not perfect, but it is a great assist if you need it. You do have a raise hand button as well. If you really want to speak, we can try to use that. That's a little harder for us to track. So if you find that no one's calling on you with your hand raised, please go ahead and put something in that Q&A. It's a lot easier for us to track that way. All right, so how you can stay informed, you can jot this down. We'll have it again at the end of the presentation. So www.covington.wa.gov. You've got a project-specific web page that we will be posting all of our information on. So future notices, updates on the project, history, you can see there's some other background information there currently. And then if you'd like to be added to the project's email list for updates sent directly to you, you can email Ethan. You can see here at his email address as well. And we'll have this again at the end of the presentation. All right, so some background. So SoCoPark is a new park, so there is no park improvement there today. You might not be as familiar with where it's currently at. It sits off of Southeast Wax Road. You can see in the red box here outlined. It is across the street from the future town center. So long-term, it will have a fair amount of development across the street from it. It will start to feel very much like a downtown park, but it also sits along Jenkins Creek. And so we're kind of have this dichotomy of being a little forward thinking from an urban nature, but also really nestled in a great woodland area and with access to that creek running through the park. To the right-hand side of the page, you can see there's those 3 parcels that Ethan mentioned off of Wax Road. You can see also in the aerial the connection to Jenkins Creek Park, which some of you may be more familiar with a little further away, and some opportunities that we'll talk about later to make some connections, at least long-term plan for those connections to try and interconnect those 2 park facilities. You'll notice north is up in the aerial that has the red box. We actually shifted a little so it fits on our page a little bit more. So when we say north, southeast, west, we're going to assume that north means to the right-hand side of your page. It's not quite perfect north in this case, but it'll make our discussions a little bit easier to orient everybody. We have a significant amount of wetland on our site. So you can see here the Jenkins Creek towards the bottom of your page. The blue line represents the wetland boundary itself. In this case, Jenkins Creek and the wetland is very much contiguous. There's not really a defined line between the two. And then what that means for our site is that you see those next 2 white dash lines as you kind of move to what would be west towards Wax Road. Those are our buffer limits. We also have a shoreline jurisdiction that falls within our project. And so the end result is there's some great open space that we can take advantage of for project and park improvements, but we are limited to really push those improvements more towards Wax Road and have those environmental sensitive areas more protected closer to the wetlands and the creek. And so you'll see that reflected in the concepts that we're going to show you today. Couple of photos just so you can kind of see what it looks like. The top, let's see, left-hand side is from Wax Road. So if you drive by there today, you'll see that split rail fence and kind of an open meadowy lawn area with the trees in the background. There is some really nice maintained understory and native vegetation within that forested space. A number of the trees are not quite as healthy as well, in particular in the open lawn spaces, but then you can see up here in the upper left that view of the creek. We did an extensive site analysis, so we studied not only the environmental sensitive areas on the site and documented those, but we also looked at accessibility opportunities, land use, where we can get connections, what the trees are like and their characteristics, the topography, and a number of other factors to kind of determine what makes the most sense on the site and what really seemed to fit with the character of the park itself. And so that led us to a vision, really thinking about SoCoPark as a place to gather and play is kind of one of those core principles. This is going to be in the downtown area, but it feels very natural when you're in the space. And so trying to connect that natural environment to the larger community, have some educational opportunities, enhance the ecological value, but recognize that we also have a really strong connection to the future town center. And so this imagery and identity are just a number of words and ideas that start to help convey that, both from the natural space, walkability, relaxing, playfulness, to the tribal history and cultural context. So just really kind of trying to create a balance to all of these different ideas that really make a lot of sense and fit within the park. There's been some community process and outreach already to date, so we're going to highlight that. There's been a PROS planning process. So PROS stands for Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan. So it's more of a planning for parks within the whole city, system-wide. And so what you see here are both the results of their kind of a combined results of the 2 surveys that they've done, as well as they also did a student survey. And those community priorities very much are in line with what you're going to see proposed for the park. Off-road trails, playgrounds, pools, splash pads, water. I sort of take that as water, interest in water, and creek conservancies, other sorts of activities. And some of those community concerns that came up in the citywide surveys, you'll also see reflected in some background in some early surveys we did for our park itself. Safety, crime prevention, making sure we have a response to transient activities, continuing to be able to maintain what we build, and just general sightlines and traffic safety. We did a specific survey for SoCoPark, so thinking these were your citywide needs and interests. Now, what makes the most sense for SoCoPark specifically? We had 612 responses and over 350 individual comments. So that is a huge turnout and shows a lot of interest in this park and the improvements. You can see on the right-hand side in bold, we asked people the importance of providing specific activities at SoCoPark, and you can see the ones that came to the top of the list. And then the community comments, there was a strong interest in a splash pad. So one of the things we'll talk about tonight is the opportunity to integrate something more playful type of a fountain opportunity. We don't really have space for a full spray park. But that is something that is kind of continues to be looked at more on a citywide basis. There's also was a fair amount of support for a dog park. That's something that you're also not going to see at SoCo specifically because of the constraints that we have on our site, but something that the city is continuing to look at, an opportunity of where a dog park could be located within the city. And some other interests for various types of sports. Again, we're pretty limited in space, so some of those don't really fit well in this context. But of the things that people said they wanted to see most within our survey, you can see those ones that are highlighted. Virtually all of these, I think, are integrated into the park master plan. So we developed 3 concepts initially, everything from a very minimal intervention to what we call the maximum intervention. The first concept really took a very light footprint, kept entirely out of the wetland and the buffer areas, and just focused all of our improvements up close to Wax Park or Wax Road. That's very limiting in what kind of programmatic activities we could provide. The second concept started to breach that boundary a little bit into those wetland buffers, added a little bit more programmatic opportunity in the concept 3, really kind of maximize that with soft surface trails and open space into those buffers, keeping all of our major improvements outside of those buffer zones, but starting to think about what activities can we feasibly move into those wetland zones, things like education, trails, things that are really water dependent and supportive of having the proximity to the creek and the wetlands. And so it's that concept 3 that was really, I think, had the most interest from City Council and the Parks Commission. And so that was what was moved forward into a preferred concept. And that preferred master plan, you can see here, integrated a lot of those programmatic activities that the community said they were interested in. So we really maximize the space available for a playground. We both have more traditional kind of play space that you might expect in a park, but also thinking about natural play and nature nodes. We'll talk more about those later as well. Opportunities for an amphitheater. We have a very natural kind of sloping lawn space, and so we could actually do a little bit of those light activities and events. How the trail connections would work, where we could have the best views of the creek. And then also bringing in ADA parking off of Wax Road. What you're seeing here along the top side of this page is the future improvements for Wax Road. This is the city's long-term plan of what Wax Road would look like. We also have a very large mid-block crossing with a connection to the future in town center. As that town center develops, we would expect that crossing and that entry plaza to really kind of be developed more along with that town center design. And then the feedback we received from the commission and council was really, originally we had just provided a porta potty enclosure for restrooms. And we heard really loud and clear that a permanent restroom was really desired, and it should continue to be located near the play area to really maximize the play value. This is going to be kind of a park in the heart of that town center. And so has really a lot of opportunity to provide some great play experience. To move the nature play closer to the playground, we had it a bit separated. And so I think really being able to have someone be able to sit with their kids in the playground, and whoever runs off to those nature play or some of those trails to have good sight lines and have a close proximity so that you can really monitor those kiddos wherever they may be. They really liked the trail network, the ADA parking, and kind of the relationship, the various activities to each other. So we continue to work through those, provide a lot of walkability and a lot of different opportunities. And then you can see here that playful art / fountain is that red asterisk in the middle. That's the idea that came about to kind of integrate something that is a little bit more water-based, something like a fountain you can play in or a splash kind of element to it. And have it be in close proximity to the playground, but also part of the entry to really be something a bit more iconic, as well as some other type of gateway feature. So we're going to talk more about that as part of the more interactive part of this meeting. And so that became our final master plan. Basically readjusting those nature play nodes, bringing in a little bit more picnic and seating areas, really kind of fine tuning the relationship of the various picnic shelters to the playground and the parking and the various features around, and bringing in a formal restroom. The other thing that was added that you can see here in the white on either end is really a direct recognition of a future connection to Jenkins Park through a Jenkins Creek trail that is a long-term desire by the city. So these are just some visual references of what those different types of programmatic opportunities could look like, from trails and open lawn, restrooms, overlooks, how we deal with stormwater and parking on the site. And you can start to see some ideas of what those nature play nodes and playground opportunities might be. All right, we want to pause here and give you a chance to offer if you have any questions on the master plan itself. From here, we're going to go a little bit more detail into the playground, the nature play nodes, what our phase 1 improvements are going to be. So we have some other opportunities coming up as well. We're going to leave maybe a good 5 or 10 minutes for some discussion here if you have questions you want us to answer, and then we'll move on. It also gives me a chance to catch my breath. I'm not seeing anything popping in the Q&A button. Is there anything in the chat yet? No. Okay. I'll give you a few more chances, a few more minutes if you do have any questions on anything you've seen or heard so far. Okay, we can always come back. We have another Q&A session at the end. So if you think of something, you can type it into that Q&A at any point in time. It won't get lost, and we can basically come and bring it up as we move into the next phase. Question did come up. Why is the city not investing in Jenkins Creek Park? Ethan, I know there's a concurrent process for Jenkins Creek. Do you want to maybe take a few minutes and talk about that?
Sure, I can take that. Obviously, the city is trying to invest in different areas in the city, and this is one project in the South Covington Park area. The city currently is investing in Jenkins Creek Park with, it's a slightly over $2 million project that is on the east side of Jenkins Creek Park. It used to be a RV storage and boat storage business on a piece of property. The city purchased the property last year and is currently in the design process with hopes to construct a parking lot and a main entrance for that park. And that would be a kind of the first phase of reinvestment back into that park. And then there's future phases as funding becomes available for Jenkins Creek Park as well. It's certainly on the city's radar.
And then there's another question, Ethan, about homeless, and can we discuss the homeless that will most likely try to take over this park? And I know we've talked about that a lot during our process as well.
Sure. Obviously, homelessness is a regional issue, and it impacts this region as well. We have had homeless camping in our parks. It's not as bad as some other parts of the region. And we do kind of just deal with those on a case-by-case scenario with our police, and we try to connect them with services. And the city has actually added a community care navigator this year to kind of help with mental health situations as well. Then there's the design component, that's certainly on our radar as we design these parks, to how can we make sure that there's open sight lines and not areas that kind of lend themselves to camping and that kind of thing.
And that's what we call crime prevention through environmental design. It's called CPTED for short. It's a process that we're trained in extensively. And when you do see some of that maybe less desirable activity occasionally now in the park, it doesn't have any active uses. There's not great sight lines back into some of those wooded areas. And so one of the comments we got as we've been going through this process is to make sure that we do open up those sight lines. So there is better visibility through the park, and just by the sheer activation of the park will also help. So intentionally bringing some of those trails back into that woodland area does help kind of deter some of those activities. Okay, let's go ahead and go on to the next section, and then we can pick up some of those other questions that you might have as we go into the next pieces.
Yes, so the initial park improvements will be focused on getting the park open to the public. Some of the design criteria that we need to keep in mind for phase one is too responsive to community feedback as well as to city feedback that we've received so far. Designing a low maintenance park and providing vandal resistant solutions, and keeping park user safety in mind and applying those crime prevention through environmental design principles, like Juliet already explained. Also, at the same time, starting to create this unique character that the community members would like to see built into this park. And also, as a reminder, we are tied to grant terms and conditions, which play into budget, scope, and schedule of the phase one development. Other requirements we are tied to are maximum allowed developable area, for instance, for the park. So the hardscape, also the formalized play surfacing, it's all counted towards that area, and we have limitations to keep in mind related to those as well. Due to recent unpredictable bidding climate and volatile construction costs that I think every one of us has experienced as long as you undertake some improvement projects, even at your own home. So we do need to keep an open mind to include bid alternates as part of the design and implementation of those phase one improvements for the park. Again, the phase one improvements are focused on getting the park open to the public. So the improvements included are off-street ADA parking, establishing a trail network throughout the park site, and also provide flexible open lawn areas and nature play elements. The proposed trail network, like Juliet described, includes paved path connection closer to Wax Road and the soft surface trail connection closer to the sensitive areas and wetlands. So we have identified 2 bid alternates based on a rough cost estimate exercise during the master plan. What's shown in this orange and peach color is part of the base bid for phase one improvements, and highlighted in blue are the 2 alternates that we have identified so far. first one in darker blue highlights the soft surface trail. The second alternate with a lighter blue identifies an area, the additional area for the open lawn. And what we've heard so far from the City Council and Parks and Recreation Commission members is that enhancements of trail system are generally preferred over adding more of that flexible open lawn. And so just this feedback will guide us through decision making when we get to that point. And here is just a quick visual reference of the elements that are included in phase 1 improvements. Again, trails, flexible open lawn, ADA parking, and biofiltration to the right of the screen. Now let's focus our discussion on the future phases. As the order and implementation of future improvements beyond this initial phase 1 are largely determined on how funding becomes available. And with that said, we would like to focus today's, the rest of the discussion kind of on the character and feel of some of those elements, specifically focus on the middle column on the light gray background. To take a look at the entry plaza, playground, and nature play nodes character. And then we'll go into some live polling as well. Okay, so for the entry plaza and gateway, we'd like to introduce the 3 different character options shown on this screen. The architectural character brings urban aesthetic with clean lines and can offer opportunity for weather protection, be it from the rain that we see in this area quite a bit, or the summer sun and heat. The second option, public art, allows a range of aesthetics, urban or natural, to be determined, and also allows to integrate local community values. The third option, playful water feature, is interactive and engaging and could bring either urban or more natural aesthetic. So many different ways to approach this. And now we get to the fun part. Let's do some live polling for just this instant and immediate feedback during this open house event. Please let us know which character best represents your vision for SoCoPark. And for this particular slide, feel free to select more than one character option. To participate in live polling, scan the QR code or type in menti.com into your internet browser. If
and
you
the link
have
was also posted into the chat to make
Great.
it even easier.
Fantastic. And basically, if you have trouble participating in this live poll, don't worry. You'll have a chance to also participate via the survey. The survey will go. The survey link is already posted in the project website, so you will definitely have the opportunity to chime in with your preferences. So don't worry if you can't figure it out.
And if you do missed the QR code or didn't quite get that to work, if you go to menti.com, it'll ask you to enter a code. You can see your code at the top of our screen here. You just enter that code and you should jump right in. It is kind of fun to kind of get a sense from everybody here what you'd like to see. It is totally fine to put it in the chat as well if this isn't quite working for you. So thanks. Putting the water feature in the shelter kind of walkway as the preferred images as well. We will kind of track all of this. It does not replace the survey. We're still going to ask you to go to that online survey because then your comments get completely integrated into everybody else who takes that online survey. But it really is fun to kind of see what people who participate today are starting to think. And it looks like that water feature, the architectural, are a little bit tied. We don't have a ton of people participating just yet. We have a couple more of these. And so what you'll see is as you kind of go through, you'll sort of see a button that says next or something similar to be able to go on to the next one. Cool. I'd love if you guys put in the chat as well. We kind of talk about both an urban and a natural character. I think it's something that as we've been thinking through the design process and we start to move into those phase 1 improvements, if you've got kind of a feeling of what you really feel like this park should convey, more of the natural, more of the urban, or a mix of both, I'd love to see that in the chat as well. All right, maybe we should move on.
Okay. The next item we'd like to get your input on is the playground character. And we are introducing a few different character options with this slide. The playground character, it could be more traditional, it could be themed, custom, or natural. The traditional playground includes off-the-shelf play equipment and introduces bright colors. The themed custom playground includes customized theme, play elements, or it could be that some of the equipment is off the shelf, but some could be more customized or fully custom to really tie in with this natural character or some theme specific to the park. It could also include bright colors or speak to a more natural color palette. So a range of options to this option could go and get tailored towards. The natural playground, the third option, would include logs, nets, boulders, and other natural materials for play. And again, we get to the fun part, and for just to capture some initial and instant feedback during this event, can you please tell us which character best represents your vision for SoCoPark? But this time you can only select one option. Again, go to menti.com. The code is shown at the top of the screen.
Sometimes you have to hit refresh on your browser or your phone in order to move into that next question. I would like some feedback if you're having trouble. That way we can kind of know whether this is a tool that you're struggling with or not. It's one of the better ones that we found. There's a good point in one of the comment chat about with options for toddlers. I think in all cases, both accessibility, options for accessible play and universal design, I think are things that would be considered during the design and all ages. So having things for the littlest toddlers and the little tykes as well as older ages. We try to often design things that have more kind of more natural or sort of thematic play, a little less active. Not every kid wants to climb and jump and run. And so trying to appeal to all those different kinds of interests. Looks like a pretty strong preference for a natural theme. I'm curious, for those of you who said natural, maybe you can add into the chat, is it sort of the wood that you're appealing to, or is it the nets and the kind of non-traditional play that is appealing to you in that image? And then it looks like we can probably move on. I haven't seen too many more people chime in yet.
Okay. So the third and last option and input for the character we're going to seek is on nature play nodes. So I'm going to introduce a few options for nature play nodes and the different characters. So the first option, logs and rocks, provides informal play opportunities and uses natural materials, which allows multifunctional use of those elements and also provides a good variety of sensory experiences. The informal seating option allows quiet contemplation in a natural setting and may include interpretive learning opportunities. This is to be determined later. The environmental art option, the third option, allows use of natural materials for informal play and creates a really unique character within the park. Again, we go to the live polling, menti.com, and this is our last question, just to capture some of that instant feedback. Please select only one option, scan the QR code, or at menti.com, type in the code or refresh if you still have the browser open.
I gotta say, someone in the chat put in the creek, I can't even say it, creek heritage. Which is, if I can learn to say it, is a great word to use in the future. There was also a comment about the cost differences. So in the play features themselves, the traditional is probably the least expensive, but when you get into a custom or themed play, as well as the wood kind of play elements with those nets, they tend to be about the same. There's not a huge difference between them. When we start getting into universal accessibility in multiple ages, the prices, the costs start to even out for all of those uses. Same here, the cost between doing logs and rocks versus seating, pretty much similar. There's not a huge cost difference. Bringing in environmental art and brings in an artist, so there's a little bit more kind of complexity with that. But again, depending on the artwork, the cost could end up being fairly similar for these two. Kind of a good point in the one of the chat that I think was dropped in about long lasting. And I think that was a comment we've heard from the community too, leading up to this process, was just the ability to maintain what gets put in place. Kind of the beauty of some of these nature elements is, it's wood, right? It's natural pieces. So there's some natural kind of erosion that happens to them, but it kind of makes them feel a little bit more in character too sometimes. All right, I'm not seeing dots flying around anymore.
Yeah, and this kind of provides another opportunity to pause if there are any additional questions that have come up. That'll be a good time to ask so we can address those.
There was a recognition in the chat that someone put in about it being, so close to the future city center that, it almost becomes a crown jewel, right? This is potentially, I think, as people come to parks and they see parks in Covington now, you think of the community park because it's kind of the newest and it's got some really great improvements and features in it. As the town center develops, I think this one really could start to have a lot of use as well. Which kind of brings us to the comment that just came up in the chat as well about the timeline for phase one. We'll get to that one in a little bit. We'll show you what the timeline of that is as we kind of finish off this presentation, so hold tight. Merritt, there's a question about tables for eating. Can you talk to that maybe specifically too about what's in phase one?
Yeah, so we do have some amount of picnic tables included with phase one improvements. We haven't determined the exact number yet, but hoping it'll be, close to a handful. So
we'd like to put them both in kind of the open space as well as sort of tucked under some trees. So you have some opportunities, whether you're kind of having a family picnic and want to be right in the middle of all the lawns, so you can, play your beanbag toss and some of those other lawn games, or if you want to just have a little bit more privacy off to the side. The shelters are not as part of phase one. So I know the community park has a couple of larger picnic shelters that you can rent out. Those would be part of future phases and not included with the initial opening of the park. Any other questions or thoughts? Any concerns with anything that you've seen here today? Question for you, Ethan. Do you plan to do the cleanup daily?
Um, yeah, I think we would assess, how often it needed to be cleaned, but I think things like site inspections and cleaning out the garbage cans and things like that would happen on an almost daily basis, especially in the summer season. Off season, maybe not so much, but we kind of check on that compared to, it's basically based on use. So if it needs it, we will do it.
All right, any other comments or thoughts? Okay, it's a fairly small group, so if you do, we can always take some more questions towards the end. Let's kind of move on so we can talk about that timeline. And what we see here is our project schedule. So we've been working since the beginning of the year on the concept development and refining that master plan. So we are just now moving into phase 1 design. So we'll be moving into 30% construction documents of those phase 1 improvements. As we get further into design, we'll be able to refine it a little bit more with permitting and some of the cost and the budgeting scenarios that might come up as we get more detail on the bidding climate. And then the intent is to go out to bid at the end of this year. So in that winter season, whether it's kind of late December or January, February sort of timeframe in 2023. We want to start construction by March of 2023 and be complete by June. And some of our grant funding is tied to those dates. So we are going to be moving pretty quickly on this process in order to try and hit those target dates associated with the grant. I think I saw another question come up. Let's see. What is the square footage of the total park space being developed? For phase 1? Well, let's see. Ethan, do you remember off the top of your head the total square footage of the park as a whole? Like how many acres?
It's about 5 acres.
Okay. I'd say you probably have about a quarter of that as part of phase 1. I don't have the specific square footage. I can tell you the playground is 500 square feet because that's what we're allowed. So that number I have right at the top of my head, but the rest is not quite so precise. And I think as we showed in the phasing diagram, we're hoping to kind of build out a little bit of that open space for more formal kind of maintained park lawn. So how much actually gets developed as part of phase 1 is potentially a little flexible as we get into the bidding and the final budget numbers. How you can stay informed, we wanted to kind of just give you another chance to jot down the project website. You can favorite on your phone, go do it now. And then also Ethan's contact information if you do have other questions or if you want to ask to join an email list so you can stay informed. And then the final slide we have is another QL link. In this case, it takes you directly to our survey. So we've got a survey online that'll stay open. Merritt, how long?
It's planned to stay open for a 2-week duration after this open house. And I believe that puts us to April 6th. Yes, April 6th.
April 6th.
We'll extend it if we don't get too many responses in, but that's kind of the initial plan.
So if you want to hover there, you can go take the survey now. If you have any questions taking the survey, of course, reach out to us as well with more of that contact. The contact information is also on the webpage and kind of embedded in that survey. Share it with as many people as you would like. We really like to get as much feedback as we can. Most of those questions are really geared towards the future phases, but those play nodes we are hoping to get in as part of phase 1. So we really do want some input in order to inform as we're doing at 30% design, which is starting right now. And then continuing to look for grants for those future improvements. So we really do appreciate all your effort and time today, and we can certainly take some additional questions if you happen to have any. All right, you are more than welcome. Thank you all for attending. We're going to go ahead and just leave this on if you do think of anything, but that is the end of our presentation. So you're welcome to sign off as well and stay tuned for any future updates.
Thank you for that presentation, Juliet and Merritt. That was great.